Welcome to The Debate. Today is Monday, January 19th, 2026. If you look out the window or, scroll through your news feed today, you are going to see a very specific version of America. Post offices are closed, government buildings are dark, but community centers are buzzing. Millions of people are pausing their routines to observe Martin Luther King Jr. Day. It's a moment of national reflection, a federal holiday that stands as this permanent legislative testament to the civil rights movement. But as we dig into the source material, the speeches, the history of the bill, the modern day of service toolkits, a tension emerges that we just can't ignore. Does the modern celebration of Dr. King actually preserve his legacy? Or does it sanitize a really radical critique of American society?
That really is the fundamental question of the day, isn't it? Are we honoring the civil saint, the gentle unifier, who is so often reduced to that single, safe soundbite from 1963 about a dream? Or are we willing to confront the man who wrote Letter from Birmingham Jail and that incredibly controversial Beyond Vietnam speech? It feels like we might have traded the prophet for a comfortable 3-day weekend.
See, I think that framing misses the forest for the trees. I look at today and I see a victory. I'm arguing that the national holiday and the modern focus on service are vital, hard-won institutional triumphs. They embed King's ideals of unity, nonviolence, and the beloved community into the very calendar of the American empire. And that is not a small thing.
I respect the victory of recognition, I really do. But I'm going to argue that the holiday, and specifically the heavy emphasis on individual volunteerism, actively obscures the radical King. We have sanitized the man who demanded a fundamental restructuring of the economy and fiercely opposed American militarism, effectively turning him into a mascot for the very system he was trying to dismantle.
But before we critique the how, let's not gloss over the magnitude of the what. I mean, it is so easy sitting here in 2026 to take this day for granted. But when you really look at the history, this was not inevitable. This was a massive legislative and cultural trench war. Representative John Conyers introduced the motion just 4 days after King's assassination in 1968. It took 32 years, 3 decades of relentless campaigning before all 50 states officially adopted it.
It was a struggle, certainly. And that struggle tells us something about the opposition.
Exactly. And the result of that struggle is a day that calls the entire nation to action. We see this in the day of service concept. Now, I know you have critiques of this, but the source material notes that this is deeply rooted in King's own theology. We have the Keep America Beautiful toolkit here, encouraging things like the greatest American cleanup. And it's easy to be cynical and dismiss this as just picking up trash. But it aligns perfectly with King's sermon, The Drum Major Instinct.
That is a beautiful text, I agree.
It's pivotal. King preached at the desire to be out front, to be recognized, to be the drum major, is a basic human instinct. He didn't say we should crush that ego. He said we should transform it. He redefined greatness. He said, and I'm quoting here, "Everybody can be great because everybody can serve." The holiday institutionalizes that theological shift. From the selfish impulse to the service of others.
I see why you position it that way. And the Drum Major Instinct is absolutely essential reading. But let me give you a different perspective on that national consensus you mentioned. The version of King that allowed for such a broad national embrace is a version that is, well, it's frozen in amber. It's the King of August 28, 1963, standing at the Lincoln Memorial. But as the analysis from Yes Magazine points out, King evolved significantly in the 5 years after that speech. The reformer of 1957, who believed there were open-minded moderates in the South, became the radical critic of 1967, who believed America's soul was, quote, poisoned.
Poisoned is a very strong word to use, especially when we are talking about a day that's meant for national unity.
It is his word, though. That's my point. In Beyond Vietnam, he called for a radical revolution of values. He explicitly identified the giant triplets. We need to be clear about what those are: racism, extreme materialism, and militarism. He saw them as interconnected. So when we focus entirely on the day of service, on picking up litter or using sustainable lunchboxes, as valuable as those things are environmentally, we are treating symptoms. King didn't just want us to be kind to our neighbors, he wanted us to question the economic system that created poverty in the first place. The holiday, by focusing on these individual acts of charity, risks silencing his demand for structural justice.
I think that frames the conflict perfectly. You view the holiday as a dilution. I view it as a necessary platform. But let's dig into the history of the holiday itself, because the resistance to it suggests that the establishment certainly didn't view it as a safe, sanitized gesture at the time. I mean, if he was just a civil saint, why was it so hard to get the bill passed?
Well, let's be honest, a big part of that was simply that they didn't want to honor a black man.
It was deeper than that. Look at Arizona. This is a fascinating case study in the source material. Governor Bruce Babbitt declared it a holiday by executive order in '86, but his successor, Governor Evan Metcham, canceled it in 1987. He didn't just ignore it, he called it illegal. And that decision sparked a massive backlash. Stevie Wonder boycotted the state. The NFL actually stripped Phoenix of the 1993 Super Bowl and moved it to Los Angeles. That cost the state an estimated $500 million. That doesn't sound like the establishment was comfortable with King. That sounds like a cultural battleground where the holiday was a weapon for progress.
That proves the fear of his message, yes? But look at how the holiday eventually passed. This is the crucial nuance. To get it through Congress and to get it accepted by holdouts like Arizona or South Carolina, supporters had to emphasize the safe king. When President Reagan signed the bill in 1983, look at his remarks. They focused heavily on colorblindness and the 1955 bus boycott. He framed King as a man who awakened something strong and true, but he contextualized it strictly within the framework of American democracy self-correcting. Reagan mentioned a change of heart. He did not mention King's anti-capitalist stance or his condemnation of the Vietnam War. So the price of the holiday was the sanitization of the man. They let him in the door only after they checked his pockets for matches.
I'm just not convinced by that line of reasoning, because it ignores the outcome. The struggle itself forced society to confront its values. You mentioned the NFL and entertainers like Jesse Jackson pressuring Arizona. That is exactly the kind of nonviolent direct action King advocated. The fact that Senator Strom Thurmond, a staunch segregationist, eventually voted for the holiday shows that the movement forced the establishment to bend. It wasn't just sanitization. It was capitulation to the moral force of King's legacy. Without this holiday, King might simply be a chapter in a history book. Because of it, we have a national platform. As Coretta Scott King emphasized, it is a day on, not a day off. It provides the space for the very conversations you want to have.
But does it provide that space, or does it crowd out that space with pleasantries? Let's look at what we are actually doing on this day on. We have the toolkit from Keep America Beautiful. It suggests the hashtag Greatest 25 Litter Challenge, collecting 25 pieces of litter. It suggests back-to-work sustainability swaps, like reusable mugs.
And I have to ask, what is wrong with that? Building a cleaner environment is a public good. It brings neighbors together.
Nothing is wrong with a cleaner environment. But we are talking about Martin Luther King Jr. In Letter from Birmingham Jail, King expressed grave disappointment with the white moderate. He described this person as someone who prefers a negative peace, which is the absence of tension, to a positive peace, which is the presence of justice. And we need to define those terms. Negative peace is when things are quiet, order is maintained, and nobody is shouting. Positive peace is when justice is actually being served, which often requires noise and disruption.
So you're saying picking up litter is negative peace?
Picking up litter is the ultimate act of maintaining order. It makes the community look nice, it's safe, it creates no tension, it is negative peace.
That is a very cynical reading of service. You are equating civic pride with apathy.
Is it cynical? King said in Beyond Vietnam that true compassion is more than flinging a coin to a beggar. He went on to say, it comes to see that an edifice which produces beggars needs restructuring. When we reduce King Day to a community cleanup, we are flinging coins. We are treating the symptoms, litter or hunger in a specific instance, without asking why the community is neglected or why people are hungry in the richest nation on earth. We are ignoring his demand to question the fairness and justice of many of our past and present policies.
I see why you think that, but I would frame it differently. You are creating a false dichotomy between service and structural change.
as if you can't do one while working toward the other. King didn't reject the humble servant, he elevated him. Back to the drum major instinct, he critiques the ego, the need to be first. He says, "He who is greatest among you shall be your servant." The day of service, whether it is cleaning a park or feeding the hungry, is about cultivating that instinct in the American citizenry. It is about replacing the selfish impulse with a desire to serve the beloved community. You have to build the habit of care before you can build the legislation of justice.
But service without political education is just charity. It feels good, but it changes nothing about the power dynamics.
It is the foundation of community. The Keep America Beautiful toolkit talks about building a cleaner, greener, and more welcoming place. That is the physical manifestation of the beloved community. If we cannot care for our shared spaces, how can we care for our shared laws? Furthermore, the holiday celebrates the legislative victories, the Civil Rights Act, the Voting Rights Act. It reminds us that service can lead to systemic change. It's not just about the litter, it's about the people standing shoulder to pick it up. That is the network of mutuality King described in Birmingham.
Network of mutuality is a beautiful phrase, but let's look closely at who is in that network today. The toolkit lists grant funders and partners, AT&T, Scotts Miracle-Gro, Target.
Major American employers. They're part of the fabric of the country.
Exactly. Major multinational corporations. In Beyond Vietnam, King was explicitly anti-imperialist and critical of Western capitalism. He wasn't just talking about race, he was talking about money. He said, "With righteous indignation, it will look across the seas and see individual capitalists of the West investing huge sums of money in Asia, Africa, and South America, only to take the profits out with no concern for the social betterment of the countries." He said this is not just. He criticized profit motives and property rights being considered more important than people.
But he was criticizing exploitation, not the existence of commerce itself. He wasn't a communist, he was a Christian minister calling for fairness.
He called for a radical revolution of values against those giant triplets, one of which was extreme materialism. How can a holiday sponsored by multinational corporations honestly reflect a man who saw the profit motive as a potential enemy of justice? The corporate sponsorship of MLK Day is, for me, the ultimate proof that we have tamed the radical. We have turned a man who was investigated by the FBI and hated by the establishment into a brand safe enough for a back-to-work sustainability swap. It's co-optation, plain and simple.
That's a compelling argument, though I would argue it misses the strategic reality King operated in. King sought reconciliation, not just revolution. He didn't speak only to radicals, he spoke to my fellow Americans. He wanted to save the soul of America. In Letter from Birmingham Jail, he notes that we are caught in an inescapable network of mutuality. He believed that the goal of America is freedom. He wouldn't reject the resources that help bring people together.
He wouldn't reject resources, but he would reject the co-opting of his message. You cannot serve two masters.
But consider the World House vision that Coretta Scott King described. She spoke of a world where people and nations triumph over poverty and war. When a corporation, a government, and a community activists all pause on January 19th to acknowledge King, that is a step toward the World House. It brings people together across divides. The day of service is a point of entry. It invites the moderate, the conservative, and the radical to the same table, a table of brotherhood, as he dreamed in 1963. If you kick the corporations away from the table, you lose the chance to influence them.
I'm sorry, but I just don't buy that the table is truly open if we aren't allowed to talk about the war machine. That is the third of the giant triplets. King's Beyond Vietnam speech is perhaps the most relevant text for today, and it is the least discussed on his holiday. He explicitly linked the war abroad to poverty at home. He called the war a demonic, destructive suction tube that draws men, skills, and money away from rehabilitation of the poor.
To be fair, he was speaking specifically about the Vietnam War in that context. It was a specific historical moment.
No, he was speaking about a pattern of American behavior. That's why the speech is so dangerous. He said, the war in Vietnam is but a symptom of a far deeper malady within the American spirit. He warned that we would be marching for the next generation against wars in Guatemala, Peru, Thailand, Cambodia, Mozambique, unless there is a significant and profound change in American life and policy. And look where we are. We are still dealing with the massive military-industrial complex. King saw that you cannot have a great society at home while you are killing children abroad. To celebrate King without debating our military budget is to ignore his most fierce urgency of now.
It is true that Beyond Vietnam is a challenging text, but remember, King was criticized heavily for it at the time. He was told by his own allies, peace and civil rights don't mix, but he spoke anyway. The fact that we are discussing it now on a federal holiday named after him proves that the holiday has not silenced him. It has preserved his voice. If we didn't have the holiday, would we be reading Beyond Vietnam today, or would it be buried in an archive somewhere?
It preserved his name. I'm arguing it silenced his voice. The holiday makes us feel like we did it. We checked the box. We honored the man so we don't have to listen to the prophet.
I disagree. The holiday provides the annual occasion to read that speech. Without the holiday, King becomes just another historical figure. With the holiday, he is a living challenge. You mentioned the white moderate earlier. The holiday forces the white moderate to say his name, to hear his voice, and perhaps, year after year, to move closer to his truth. Reagan signed the bill and admitted a change of heart. That is the power of the legacy. It converts, it doesn't just condemn.
But we must be careful not to confuse conversion with comfort. King said it in the drum major sermon that he didn't want a long funeral. He didn't want them to mention his Nobel Prize. He wanted to be remembered as a drum major for justice, for peace, for righteousness. He wanted to leave a committed life behind. A committed life is dangerous. It involves risk. It involves getting arrested, as he did in Birmingham. It involves being unpopular. My fear is that the holiday teaches us that change is popular, that it's a parade, that it's a greatest American cleanup. It teaches us that we can all get along without the creative tension that King said was absolutely necessary for growth.
Is that the parade and the cleanup are the result of the tension, not the absence of it. We must celebrate the victories. We must celebrate the fact that the sons of former slaves and the sons of former slave owners are indeed sitting down together, often at those very service events. To dismiss the holiday as sanitized is to dismiss the genuine progress it represents. It is to dismiss the 32 years of labor by people like John Conyers and Stevie Wonder. They didn't fight for a hollow victory. They fought for a day where the nation pauses to calibrate its moral compass.
Then let us calibrate it accurately. That is all I am asking.
I believe we are, by engaging in service, by looking at our neighbors, whether through the lens of the #Greatest25 challenge or through voter registration drives. We are keeping the drum major instinct focused on justice rather than ego. The holiday is a vessel. It is up to us to fill it. It's a day to celebrate the legislative victories of the Civil Rights Act and the Voting Rights Act, and to recommit to the work that remains.
I agree that it is a vessel, but we must stop filling it with sugar water. We must not let the civil saint obscure the prophet. We have to remember the king who wrote that we are sadly mistaken if we think the administration will act without pressure. True commemoration requires addressing the triple evils of racism, materialism, and militarism. It requires us to look at the wealth gap, to look at our foreign policy, and to ask if we are on the right side of the world revolution. We cannot just celebrate a dream from 1963, we must grapple with the demands of 1968.
And perhaps that is the beauty of the source material we have before us. It demands that we look at King as a complex figure, both the unifier who inspired a nation to change its heart and the radical who demanded a revolution of values.
Precisely. The holiday belongs to both, but only if we are brave enough to read the whole book, not just the preface.
The listener is left to decide how best to use the fierce urgency of now. Whether through service, protest, or quiet reflection, the legacy remains ours to shape. Thank you for joining us on The Debate.
Thank you.